What are near-death experiences? Have you heard about them? Have you ever heard stories from people who have been on the brink between life and death and experienced extraordinary events? Today, we will explore what NDEs, or near-death experiences, are. If this topic interests you, we'll frequently discuss it here on our channel, so please like the video and subscribe to the channel. But what exactly are near-death experiences? Simply put, it's an out-of-body experience that occurs involuntarily or by force. However, an NDE is more than just a simple extracorporeal experience. But what does it mean to leave one's own body? Yes, from our physical body, something detaches, something that is called the soul, spirit, consciousness, among various other terms. To simplify, we can say that it is a phenomenon in which the consciousness itself moves outside the physical body. In the case of a near-death experience, this extracorporeal encounter is just the first sign that something extraordinary is happening. However, note that a near-death experience is a traumatic event where a person undergoes an extreme situation such as a fall, a shock, or a serious illness. In summary, it's a traumatic event where the person finds themselves between life and death. The vast majority of people who go through such traumatic events do not remember the period when they were unconscious. If asked about what they felt, many would answer that they saw or felt nothing. But what is interesting is that there is a small percentage of people who have gone through a critical event between life and death who report much more than simply not remembering anything. It was through studies, like those by an American psychiatrist named Raymond Moody, who investigated people who had been between life and death, that we began to understand these narratives better. He discovered a series of phenomena, occurrences very common in people of all ages, races, creeds, nationalities, and genders, an essentially universal phenomenon that was the near-death experience, NDE. This researcher, Dr. Raymond, in the 1970s, published a book titled Life After Life, in which he detailed 150 cases of NDEs that he analyzed in great depth. He noted that there were very common points connecting these phenomena, at the same time exotic and strange, and that were not related to the individual's prior personal beliefs. They were entirely independent. He was also the first to introduce the term near-death experience. This book broke through the academic bubble, became a bestseller, and sold over 13 million copies, popularizing the term NDE and bringing knowledge about the subject to the general public. But what characterizes an NDE? There are a few indicators. The first, and perhaps best known, which we have already touched upon, is the out-of-body experience. People typically see themselves floating or hovering above the ceiling, often of the ICU or hospital where they are admitted. They observe all the events happening below, such as doctors attempting to resuscitate them, and sometimes even venture through the hospital, observing family members in the waiting room. This is the first characteristic of an NDE. The next characteristics I will mention are not necessarily mandatory. That is, a person who undergoes an NDE will not necessarily experience all of this. There are elements that are part of some people's experiences, and not others. But the fact is that a classic NDE encompasses a series of events and phenomena like those I will mention here. One of the most common is the vision of a tunnel of light through which the person passes, entering and moving inside this tunnel, representing, in a broader sense, the journey of the person's consciousness or soul. There is no defined order, so other phenomena may occur before, during, or after the tunnel. One of them is called the panoramic life review. The person has a retrospective of their own life, as if they could see every detail of thoughts and situations from birth to that moment, things they might not even remember anymore. At this time, they have at their disposal a complete and retrospective view of their life, which might make them feel embarrassed or happy. But either way, they see themselves with total clarity. Another characteristic of NDEs is the dilation of time, meaning the person loses the sense of time. Sometimes the experiences seem to last days, months, or in some rare cases even years, and upon returning to their body, many discover that only a few hours have actually passed. Another point highlighted by people who undergo an NDE is the sensation of peace and harmony. No matter how traumatic the event in the physical world, during the NDE, the person feels profoundly calm and at peace. It is not necessarily a terrifying experience. The vast majority of people report feeling a deep peace and tranquility during this moment. Another characteristic is the processes of light. People see many lights and energies surrounding them. In the case of the tunnel, these lights and energies present themselves very intensely, contributing to an immersive and profoundly impactful experience. Another serious aspect of NDEs is that, at the end of the tunnel, or at some point during the experience, the person meets a being of light. This being of light might be a deceased relative, a friend, or even a stranger, but the person then finds themselves connected with this being, who often guides them through a very beautiful place, and may even reveal things about the person's life in some cases. It doesn't happen in every case, but there can be instances where this being of light helps the person decide whether they want to die or return to human life, meaning the soul or consciousness is given the choice to stay in that place or return to their body. However, there are also cases where the person must return regardless of choice, as they need to complete their journey on Earth. Thus, the being of light acts as a benefactor, an assistant who not only accompanies the experience, but also provides insights and ideas to make the experience more meaningful. This being of light plays the role of a helper, a facilitator in the NDE process, and often there is direct communication. The vast majority of people who report an NDE describe encounters with this entity, usually very luminous and benevolent, and it is common to narrate feelings of deep brotherhood and compassion coming from this being. Typically, along with this being, there is also a process of limitation, another characteristic of NDEs. The person finds themselves facing a boundary they know they should not cross. If they cross this boundary, it is as if they know they will not return, that they will indeed die. This process is entirely symbolic and varies greatly from person to person. For example, some people see this boundary as a door. They know they cannot pass it, because if they do, they will die. It could also be a bridge, a river, or any other symbol. But in their experience, there is a clear understanding that crossing this limit means no return. At the end of all these experiences, which are extremely different and transcendental, the person inevitably returns to their body. So, someone might ask, is it a dream? A hallucination? No. For the person who has gone through it, it is something extremely real and deeply intense. Some claim it is an experience far more real and concrete than the life we lead here. There are many patients and people who have said, look, it was the most real thing I've ever experienced in my life. There are cases of people who, years after having the NDE, have vivid memories of what they went through, unlike things they have experienced in everyday life, marks that neither dream nor hallucination can make. Science is increasingly studying this phenomenon, and there are serious indications that it might indeed be a completely real experience, despite the peculiarities or particularities it may present. For example, these particularities are shaped according to the temperament and even the beliefs of the person, as if it were a thematic experience, all to make the person as comfortable and familiar as possible. But what does that mean? I'll give you an example of the being of light. A person who went through a classic NDE and saw the being of light, if they have a completely neutral narrative, would say, look, I saw a being of light. Many people, upon seeing an unknown figure enveloped in luminosity or certain impactful energies, might say, ah, I saw Jesus, or I saw God. Thus, Christians often interpret the experience from the religious viewpoint they hold, but this is about individual interpretation. Now, here's something interesting. Christians sometimes interpret it always from the viewpoint of saints or religious figures known to them, while Hindus see their gods, Buddhists their figures, and so on. It rarely happens that a Hindu sees a Christian figure, or a Buddhist sees a Hindu figure, for example. Generally, the experience is always related to what the person is most inclined to interpret. Some say they saw Jesus, others that it was God, and so forth. But, despite interpretation being very individual, what is established here is a fact. The person saw a being of light, an intelligence, a deceased person who helped in this process. Now, whether the being had a beard or not, whether it was old or even young, depends greatly on that particularity of the intimate process experienced by the person. Therefore, you see, the experience can be shaped, as I said, according to the person's vision, or even their own interpretation of that bias. However, it's not necessarily mandatory for a person to go through all this to have a near-death experience. There are many variations, but basically, you have an out-of-body experience, a life review, a tunnel of light, a deceased being or a being of light, and a boundary area that you cannot cross, the point of no return. All these are classic evidences of a near-death experience. All these phenomena are part of the Grayson scale, a method created by American psychiatrist Charles Grayson, who numbered a series of items to facilitate what characterizes an NDE or not. Each item on the scale is worth 2 points, and having a score above 7 points characterizes a classic near-death experience. But why do we have an NDE? It is understood to be a process that offers an improvement, an evolutionary shake-up that the person ends up receiving. Many people who have gone through an NDE have restructured their lives. People who were materialistic ceased to be. People who did not believe in anything beyond the material found a new meaning in life. They recycled their way of thinking and acting in relation to human life. Thus, it is a traumatic experience from a physical standpoint, but highly transformative in life. People tend to become more spiritual and view the world in a different way. It is also very common to lose the fear of death. Today, scientific proof that NDEs prove life after death does not yet exist, but all indications are that we are on our way to this. So, if you have experienced an NDE or know someone who has, please put it in the comments. Write to us. We want people to have the freedom to talk about their own experiences without being labeled as crazy. Few people undergo an NDE, but not as few as one might think. It is estimated that about 5 to 10% of people who have had cardiac problems, like a heart attack, experience some level of NDE. This number is significant. Thousands of people go through this all over the world every year. Our channel will specifically address these topics so that people feel more confident and calm about sharing safely, knowing that there are others who have had significant experiences in their lives. Recommend this video to someone you think might have had such an experience. Thank you for watching the video up to here. See you next time.